Hello, good morning from Singapore. Welcome to the third and the last panel of the Gender, Security and Digital Space webinar series. This webinar series is co-organized by the Center of Excellence for National Security, CENS, at RSIS at the Nanyang Technological University and the Canadian High Commission. I'm Gülizar Hacıyakupoğlu. I'm a research fellow at CENS, and I will be moderating today's panel. Today's panel is on fighting gender-based hate speech and disinformation and the role of social innovation. We have three acclaimed speakers. Let's introduce them in order. First, Minister Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister in charge of social innovation, will deliver an opening speech. Minister Tang is known for revitalizing the computer languages Perl and Haskell and building the online spreadsheet system Ethercalc in collaboration with Dan Britain. Minister Tang served on Taiwan National Development Council's Open Data Committee and the 12-year Basic Education Curriculum Committee, and led the country's first e-rulemaking project. Minister Tang previously worked in the private sector as a consultant with Apple on computational linguistics, with Oxford University Press on crowd lexicography, and with social text on social interaction design. Minister Tang actively contributes to GovZero in the social sector. GovZero is a community that creates tools for the civil society. After Minister Tang, our first speaker, Maria Ressa, will take the stage. Maria Ressa is the co-founder of Rappler, a digital-only news site fighting for press freedom in the Philippines. Maria Ressa was celebrated for her work on disinformation by multiple organizations. To name a few, she was named the Times Magazine's 2018 Person of the Year and one of Time's most influential women of the century. She was also part of BBC's 100 Most Inspiring and Influential Women of 2019 and Prospect Magazine's World's Top 50 Thinkers. Maria Ressa is also a recipient of multiple awards, including the Golden Pen of Freedom Award from the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers. Before Rappler, Maria Ressa opened and ran CNN's Manila bureau for nearly a decade, and then Jakarta bureau for 10 years. Maria Ressa is the author of the books Seeds of Terror and From Bin Laden to Facebook. Last, we will hear from Priyank Mathur. Priyank Mathur is the founder and CEO of Mythos Labs, a social enterprise that fights gender inequality and online harm using media and technology. Priyank Mathur is also the host of the current season of the United Nations' Extreme Lives, which is a docu-series about the lives of terrorists and their victims in Southeast Asia. Previously, Priyank served as a policy analyst and intelligence officer in the Office of the Secretary at the US Department of Homeland Security. And while there, he co-authored the department's inaugural Countering Violent Extremism strategy and advised the White House and senior DHS leadership on emerging terrorist threats. He also held the roles of a global consulting director at Ogilvy and Mather in New York and a comedy writer at The Onion. Without further ado, let me invite Minister Tang to deliver the opening speech.
Thank you all for allowing me to share this opening speech around what we call humor over rumor, the Taiwan model to counter disinformation and the infodemic. What you're looking at is Zongchai, a very cute dog, Shiba Inu, who is the companion animal of the participation officer of our Ministry of Health and Welfare. Indeed, we found that the only emotion that spreads faster, that has a higher R value than discrimination and vengefulness, is humor. And we use this idea of humor over rumor to communicate pretty much everything, ranging from the physical distance. When you're indoor, keep 3 Shibas away or wear a mask. When you are outdoor, keep 2 Shibas away or wear a mask. Remember to cover your mouth and nose when sneezing. And here the dog is reminding you that masks are useful to prevent you putting your unwashed hand to your own face and things like that. And people do share this kind of, I call it the vaccine of the mind, rather quickly. And we co-create these new ideas, these remixes, if you will, to dispel popular disinformation through crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing means everyone's business with everyone's help. From the very beginning of our counter disinformation and online harassment strategy, we have a toll-free number 1922, where each and everyone can call to offer their reports on what's happening in the disinformation space. It's also a SMS, a toll-free SMS that people can use to provide check-ins and so on. So it's a multi-purpose tool. Last April, there was a young boy who called 1922 saying, "Hey, you're rationing out mask, but all I got, all my household got," the young boy said, "was pink medical mask." And the boys in my class bullied me, well, maybe face-to-face, maybe on the SNS, for wearing a pink mask. So I don't want to go to school anymore, he said. And the very next day, in the daily 2 p.m. press conference, the Central Epidemic Command scientists, medical officers, at the suggestion of the participation officer of the Ministry of Health, the person who lives with the dog, everybody wore pink. And so the Minister Chen Shizhong even goes further to say, Pink Panther was his childhood hero. And so the boy suddenly became the most hip boy in his class, for only he has the color that the heroes wear, and the hero's hero, I guess, wear. And so this is what I mean by humor over rumor and collective intelligence. It's not a top-down, take-down, shut-down way of dealing with disinformation, but rather taking disinformation and malinformation, which includes cyberbullying, and remove its harmfulness by repackaging it, much like how recombinant vaccines are made, repackage it into a humorous frame so people can share the story that reach more people and inoculate more people. And this basically gets remixed even further. And all the trending brands and so on for a couple of weeks last April all wear pink. And pink became the kind of canonical color for mask for quite a while. And so this is gender mainstreaming, but delivered in a humor over rumor frame. And to realize this timely response, we now average around 60 minutes from detecting a piece of disinformation to rolling out such funny memes to inoculate the mind. How can we proceed so quickly and respond so quickly? This is another example of what I call vaccine of the mind. There was a rumor that said the government will fine you $1 million for repeated hair perming in a week. This is, of course, not true. And the cabinet, head of cabinet, Premier Su Zhenchang, posted this picture just 60 minutes after we detect it was trending. And he said, well, a younger version of him said, and I quote, "I may be bald now, but I would not punish people with hair." And then a fine print that says, what we've introduced is a labeling requirement for hair products that only takes effect on 2021, July. But the premier, as he looks now says, however, if you perm your hair many times a week, it will not damage your bank account, but it will damage your hair. Just look at me for what will happen to your hair. Again, this is very humorous because he makes fun of himself, not any other people. So this kind of humor, not attacking any particular group or any particular individual, invites people to think collaboratively, to co-create on their own remixes, and there's some other remixes of dispelling the disinformation, and that sets the norm for pro-social interaction rather than anti-social interaction. And we rely, much as how the counter-spam community relies on people who flag their incoming email as spam, so that Spam House and other international social sector organizations can classify further incoming emails from that particular account into your spam folder. We also rely on a community called GovZero or G0V, who use a Wikipedia-like style to collaborate with pretty much everyone, including people in the primary and middle school who has media competence, not media literacy, as their basic curriculum. So they all contribute into the fact-checking community. And we work also with international journalists on the International Fact-Checking Network. So it basically works like this. First, you forward a end-to-end encrypted channels rumor that you receive maybe from your friends and family in the closed group to this fact-checking bot. There's also, like from Trend Micro, our leading antivirus company, there's a product called 防诈达人, the virus buster, that you can invite to your chat room, and it offers contextualizing service immediately. So by forwarding to these bots, we get the R value of all the trending disinformation and malinformation at that particular point. So we then direct for example, Taiwan Fact Check Center will direct their fact checkers who are nonpartisan, not funded by the government through crowdfunding. They redirect their energy to only dispel and clarify the ones that has a high R value, that is trending, that is to say, on end-to-end encrypted channels, so that when it reaches the wider channels like Facebook or Twitter, they will already have been met with a contextualizer that offers people's notice and public notice for people to make sense of that particular disinformation. Of course, there were some loopholes. For example, it used to be in 2018 and the first half of 19. If you pay Facebook, you can circumvent this entire fact-checking apparatus that we have built. And so during the election season, we basically built this norm that all the social media must treat advertisement for social and political issues as campaign donations. That is to say, offer it to the independent investigative journalist in real time for analysis. And also, we, just like campaign donations, ban foreign sponsored propaganda on social and political issues leading up to the election or referenda season. And that enabled the investigative journalist to look at how the political contributions are made. And so the politicians will not, for example, during the election, enlist the kind of dark patterns of micro-targeting, because they know they will be revealed by investigative journalists in no time, in real time. To conclude my opening remark, I would say we need to treat the issue of online harassment, malinformation, and disinformation much like how we're countering the pandemic. The infodemic, much like the pandemic, is only counterable if people enjoy universal broadband as a human right, as well as media competence curriculum as a human right. We must support research, development, and universal access to this kind of productions of vaccine of the mind by enlisting lifelong education and basic education to participate in fact-checking. And finally, for the more invested adversaries, we need also to impose a strict quarantine rule so that, for example, during election season, they do not overwhelm our fact-checkers. And this is my opening remark. Thank you for listening.
It's great to listen to you, Minister Tang. And, you know, it shows you what a government that values the facts can do. But what if it's more important to actually retain power through information? What if it's a government that manipulates the people? And let me give you an example. Let me start here. A lot of this stuff is, there's things I've lived through, unfortunately. So let me go through. Really, the core issue of everything we're going to talk about is trust, right? And we at Rappler in the Philippines, that's where I'm from, we have 3 pillars. And you can see this is also where I'll wind up. It's technology, journalism, community. The technology is actually what's shifted globally. This is where we get this. The impact of technology in our information ecosystem has been huge. Journalists are necessary to give you the facts. And the community is necessary because that's how you do anything in the real world, right? That's part of the reason you need that. The best example, the best statement that I've heard is actually from an American biologist, and he studied emergent behavior of ants. I'm worried about emergent behavior of humanity, but he says the crisis is that human nature today is, the crisis is the fact that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, right? All those 3, Paleolithic emotions. So it's our emotions. So I love that the RO of humor is larger than anger, because that's certainly what's happened. This is me, June 15th, and I think underneath all of this, I've been a journalist for 35 years. And what's happened in the last 5 years is that we saw a bottom-up, first on social media, attack on the facts, meta-narratives that are seeded. The meta-narrative against me and Rappler is that Maria is a criminal. So in 2016, that was laughable, but come So this is how it evolved. 2016, seeded on social media. 2017, President Duterte says it in his State of the Nation address. 2018, Rappler and I get 11 cases and investigations are started. 2019, I get arrested twice in a 5-week period. I have to post bail 8 times. 2020 is this photo that you're seeing now. I'm convicted for cyber libel for a story that was written 8 years earlier, a story I didn't write, edit, or supervise, at a time when the law we supposedly violated didn't even exist. And then the end of 2019, I got my 9th arrest warrant, and then in 2021, January, I got my 10th. So I'm collecting them. They go hand in hand with the awards, by the way, the joke now, because like humor, that's the only way you deal with that stuff. But meta-narratives is the way it works. And I just want to show you this because I will contextualize the sexist, misogynistic remarks because they're only tactics. This is January 6th, Stop the Steal. And this is work by the Election Integrity Partnership in the United States. And you can see how the meta-narrative was seeded. And you can also see geopolitical power play here. August 2019, election fraud seeded earliest on RT. Not a surprise. Then Steve Bannon picks it up on YouTube in August 2020. It's seeded in closed Facebook groups. Tucker Carlson picks it up in September that there is election fraud. And then in October, QAnon drops this. And of course, President Trump comes top down, right? So you see the methodology. I lived it. The United States has gone through it. Online violence doesn't stay online. It moves into the real world. This is where we come to sexist gender attacks. This is a UNESCO report. It's called The Chilling. It was released May. So what is it now? It's still May. It focused on 2 big data case studies. One is on me. The other is on Carol Cadwalader, who broke the Cambridge Analytica story, pinpointing how Facebook was being used against us. This is interesting because 73% of women journalists, this is a study done by the International Center for Journalists, who had done a March study, partnering with our research team in Rappler, just on me for International Women's Day. This was looped into here, but you can see now, this is in more than 130 countries, 73% of women journalists said they experienced online abuse. 25% received threats of physical violence. I am in that. And 20% had been attacked or abused offline, i.e. in the real world. I'm also in that. I'm very privileged. This is a breakdown of almost 500,000, and this is from the March 8 study, 500,000 social media posts. Rappler research team did the analysis on Facebook. We're a Facebook partner until today. And the University of Sheffield and ICFJ did more than 400,000 posts on Twitter. But you can see the breakdown. 60% of the online violence is all about trying to tear down credibility. And 40% are very, very personal. They're sexist, they're misogynistic, they attack the way I sound, what I say, what I do. I'll show you some of those so you can see, because if you don't know, if you are not the target, you don't see it. And that is the problem. We live in our own little Truman shows, right? On 3 billion through Truman shows. So here, what are the attack triggers? Why do they attack me? Well, it follows actually court appearances, awards, anything I do where I get a high profile media appearance. But more than anything, where did it begin? Every time we did an investigative report. Every time, always. And then what are the methods? Attacks are orchestrated, and you can read them here. I can share the link to this study. This is the ICFJ study from March this year. But I think, the most important part, again, is just like January 6th in the United States, this doesn't stay online, right? I could go to jail for the rest of my life. Did I forget to say that? That cyber libel, I'm appealing the conviction now, but that's 6 years in jail. And the rest of the 9 cases that are ongoing now, they can send me to jail for up to 100 years, longer than I have to live, right? Now let me show you some of the attacks. This is the network that attacks journalists in the Philippines. Two of them have worked with government. In fact, the Mocha Uson is still a government official. Here are some of the things that I've lived through. And this is kind of over stages, and don't take screen grabs. So, you know, they compare me to the caveman. There's lots of stuff here. The way I look, my gender, the way my bone structure is. Then you know, when people come to talk about press freedom issues, you know, this comes out, and you can look at this photo. The reason I showed it to you is that I have very dry skin. You may not see it because I got a little bit of sleep, but if I don't sleep, my skin gets dry, and what they did is they doctored the picture to show more. This became a tactic, and what they did is, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna only put this next thing on very quickly, but they started calling me scrotum face, right? So this kind of dehumanization was compared to what the Nazis did in Germany to the Jews. And this is the kind of stuff that I wake up to. Facebook takes a while to take them down. It's called scrotum face. So now they joke about that. And look at this. This is a Facebook page, one of the networks that did it, Bove PH. They're so proud they put their name on it. Again, they doctored the photo to make it look, my skin look bad. And then they add the scrotum face, right? So it's code in its own way. I'm going to end with this. You know, this is systematic. And this is a book by MIT's Sina Naral. I'm a digital fellow at MIT. It all begins here. This is the medium that collects the data. And then everything you post on social media is gathered, and a model of you that's gathered by machine intelligence, a model of you is created. And then your most vulnerable moment to a message is sold to the highest bidder. It's the new advertising or the new propaganda coming at exponential scale. Here's the thing, whether you click or not is part of the machine. Then if you click, it becomes part of the hype machine. If you don't click, that becomes part of the hype machine. And over to the right, you can see what it's done to our societies, personalized mass persuasion. At scale, you have no idea. You know, Minister Tang and I can get two different messages, but we think we're seeing the same one. And it is nudging, it nudges behavior. Just like E.O. Wilson said, it nudges our Paleolithic emotions. Our medieval institutions aren't strong enough to fight it. And in the end, the technology makes us like Pavlov's dogs in real time, experimented on. I know I'm running out of time. Hypersocialization. In the real world, we have 6 degrees of separation, right? In the virtual world, on Facebook, it's less than that, 3.5 degrees of separation. And that's part of what leads to the viral spread, right? The tyranny of trends comes to that. Let me look at the levers of how we can solve all of this, because in the end, just solving for misogyny or sexism, that's a symptom of this huge problem. We have to solve for, we have to find systemic issues. I can put a link of some of the work we've done November last year. We came up with, this is the Forum on Information and Democracy. We came up with 12 solutions. It was a group on infodemics I co-chaired with former EU Parliament member Maritka Schaake. 12 systemic, and then 250 tactical. But how do we do? What are the levers? Money, the business model, surveillance capitalism, code. It's coded in there. The fact of how we grow using friends of friends divides us and radicalizes us. What are the norms? What's the emergent behavior that comes out? And finally, what laws? Governments, please. And here's this, oh my gosh, I forgot another slide. I'm out of time. Let me just say this. Geopolitical power play is deeply connected. I'm not yet out of time. I've a minute and a half. I can do this. So geopolitical power play. Just yesterday, we came out with a story that showed how China and Taiwan is a target. So I'm curious to hear how you fight back on this, right? Geopolitical power play. Russia in 2018, we showed how the Russian disinformation networks, the same ones attacking the United States, were also active in the Philippines through, believe it or not, I'll put the link in, Canada, the alt-right in Canada. And I will put that link for that story. But now, in September last year, Facebook took down a Chinese influence operation that was targeting the Philippines. It was targeting all of Southeast Asia, but was most successful in the Philippines. And it was campaigning for, we have presidential elections next May. It was campaigning for the daughter of President Duterte for president. It was attacking me. Who am I, right? And the third thing that it was doing was it was creating fake accounts using AI generated photos for the US presidential elections. Oxford Internet Institute just came out with 2 studies, one that took 7 months to do, that looked at how China is using Twitter, right? Amplifying its diplomats and their messages. So this is critical. This is how we're going to fight back. We got to use the technology. I appeal to every government to put the guardrails on the tech so that we are not insidiously manipulated. Help independent journalism survive. It's thrilling that Taiwan is working with the journalists, not trying to put them in jail. And then finally, the last is community. Community is so critical, but as you saw in the United States, more people voted for Donald Trump. More people believed Stop the Steal and have joined QAnon partly because of what they believe, but partly because of the technology. So this will have lasting effects. When it changes your worldview, your cognitive biases increase. And what winds up happening is when people are infected by the virus of lies, their worldview changes and it tears our society apart. So sexism, misogyny, definitely problematic, but it is a tactic in how power and money works in today's world. Please help us.
Thank you to the minister and to Ms. Ressa. These were excellent presentations. So many questions myself. My name is Priyank Mathur. I run Mythos Labs, and today I'm going to be talking to you about some of our work, particularly research we did examining the impact of COVID on online misogyny. So a little bit about us. We use tech and media to counter gender inequality, online harm, and misinformation. We've had the pleasure of working with many different international organizations, and much of the report I'm talking about today was done in association with UN Women. One thing that we do, we use 3 primary levers. We use artificial intelligence to research the scope and impact of online hate speech and misinformation. We use social media literacy to immunize populations against harm, sort of what Maria was talking about. And we use comedy to counter harmful narratives. So I was very interested in hearing what the minister was talking about, and I've been following the Humor Over Rumor campaign, which I think is really awesome work that the government of Taiwan is doing. So what we are going to focus on today was a recent research report we did with UN Women looking at the impact of COVID on online misogyny. We found 3 key findings. Number 1, the volume and engagement with misogynist content did increase during COVID lockdowns. Number 2, sexist organizations are spreading new COVID-related narratives. And number 3, misogynist Twitter accounts are impacting the attitudes of their followers disproportionately. And I'll get to how we quantified that. So the first finding about the volume and interest increasing during lockdowns, this is a graph of just we looked at March to June, which is when most countries in our study, and we looked at India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia on Facebook. This is when most of these countries, all these countries, went into some form of lockdown due to COVID. And if you look at the amount of misogynist posts in 2019 during this period and compare it to 2020, you see a 3x increase from about 400 posts to 1,200. I should say that we did think about, well, haven't the number of Facebook users just gone up overall in these countries? They have, but on average for each of these countries by about 25%. So 300% increase in online misogyny, 25% increase in users. Something else is going on. We thought lockdown might be a cause. And by the way, we looked at how do we measure a misogynist post. These are all on public groups of self-proclaimed misogynist organizations. I'm talking about organizations aligned with the incel movement, organizations that are men's rights groups, MGTOW, Men Go Their Own Way, which is another misogynist group. So just simply counting the number of posts that they were making during this time period between the 2 years. We can also see that during lockdown, the number of posts and engagement with posts went up and down as lockdown became more and less strict. So this was an interesting finding. If you see, they sort of peaked, both the number of posts on Facebook and engagement, which is likes, shares, comments, peaked during the strictest phases of lockdown around April, May, and then started to come down maybe as people started to go outside a bit more and lockdowns started to get relaxed. So an interesting thing maybe for policymakers to be aware of, when you institute lockdown, you can kind of expect more online activity of all kinds, including trolling and misogyny. Same thing on Twitter. This is a graph showing, and we looked at India, Indonesia, and Philippines for Twitter because they're three of the biggest Twitter markets in Asia. And you see that peak and then gradual decline as lockdowns start to ease. Searches for misogynist terms spiked during lockdown. So you had, pardon the language on this slide, but you look at certain terms for misogynist, searches for misogynist terms spiked in May of 2020 in the Philippines. A term like feminazi, which is very commonly used in these misogynist circles, spiked in May of 2020 in Indonesia, again, during lockdown. The second and quite disturbing finding was that some of these misogynist organizations are using COVID to spread new narratives. So here's like from one of the weeks that we were looking at, some of the narratives that were most common in India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia on Facebook. And you see COVID is exposing the ugly truth about women. One of the ones we saw again and again is that, oh, COVID is showing us how anti-men our laws are, because a lot of men who were divorced couldn't see their children because of lockdowns, and they said, this is all a feminist conspiracy to keep me from seeing my child. And here are just some examples of what these narratives looked like on Facebook. So they took the form of memes or posts. That one on the left is from Sri Lanka, talking about how your wife could basically kill you during COVID. On the right, this is one from the Men's Rights Association of India. Husbands will face quarantine if wife complains of domestic violence. So the implication there is that, and then if you read the article, it's all about how women are abusing domestic violence. I saw a narrative, this one really blew our minds, that men are the real victims of domestic violence and that women are beating men up at home, and that this is somehow an epidemic we need to deal with. Again, you saw sort of in Indonesia, women are worse than COVID, comparing wives to COVID. And in India saying, economic packages distributed by the prime minister should be targeted towards men because it is proven that coronavirus is, quote, worse on men. The third thing was that the impact. We wanted to see, okay, is this really moving the needle on people's opinions? And so the methodology, we've published a paper about this, been peer reviewed, so I'd be happy to share that link with anyone. Can't really do justice to it in such a short presentation, but overall what we do is we collect all these tweets that are related to COVID and misogyny. So if you put the keywords COVID and feminazi or something in a tweet and from those countries, we collect it. We built a retweet network of the users who were tweeting this misogynist content, called them misogynists. Then we used a neural network to train the neural network on what is a misogynist tweet, what is a non-misogynist tweet from a 0 to 1 scale, use that to assign scores to each tweet, and then used opinion dynamics modeling to basically calculate an equilibrium opinion score for each user, and then removed the misogynists from the model. Because on Twitter, there is a pretty well-documented phenomenon that your opinion on a given topic tends to be influenced by the weighted average of opinions that you are exposed to. So if you take away the misogynists, how much less likely are people to develop misogynist opinions? That was what we were looking for. And the difference was the impact that misogynist tweets were having on people's attitudes towards women. So again, happy to go into detail on that if anybody would like. But the findings were that disproportionately misogynists were having an impact on people's attitudes towards women. In Indonesia, the mean misogyny score, so the average person, was 25% more likely to develop misogynist opinions as a result of being exposed to the tweets of misogynists. In India, that was 20%, and in Philippines, 19%. So around 20% in all three countries where we looked at Twitter. And what's interesting to note is that the actual percentage of misogynists was only about 5% of the total network. So 5% of the network having a 20% impact on people's opinions. How do we fight back? I agree with everything Maria said. And in line with that, we got to increase digital literacy, countering viral lies with viral truths like the minister's doing in Taiwan, and penetrating echo chambers. So we do a lot of trainings where we focus on building women's social media literacy, and we found them to be really effective. There was a participant just 2 months ago who literally, using what she learned from the training, reported hate speech that she was subjected to a month afterwards. UN Women did a whole webinar with her, and it was great, because without that training, I've met so many people, I'm sure you have too, all the other panelists and many people watching this webinar in our line of work, who don't know how to report a post, who don't know what to do if they see misinformation online. We think it's basic because we live and breathe this stuff, but for a lot of people, just that basic knowledge goes a long way. And then we use comedy to fight gender stereotypes. So like the minister, I'm a big believer. I mean, I used to write for The Onion. So I think the power of comedy to change people's minds, I'm a true believer in that. We've partnered with female comedians in 7 different countries now to make videos that use humor to counter gender stereotypes. So everything from satire to more slapstick to more sort of memes and shorter TikTok type videos. Each country's got their own sense of humor. As a comedy nerd, I love working with comedians in different parts of the world. What works in one country does not work in another, and vice versa. So I'd encourage you all to check out some of the videos on our website. And they've done well, and we've got plenty of evidence from surveys and predictive modeling that they do seem to be having an effect on people's opinions. So with that, I will stop there and would love to take your questions. Thank you very much.